So, with that being said, what do we believe, or who do I believe, had the best 5 off seasons this year? Now, I think it was pretty evident, and I had a bigger list. I ran this by my colleague Sam Yip as well as Michael Weisenberg. Basically, wanted to get the overall opinion of everybody I knew, and that was, who did they think? And everyone thought 12 teams was too many. I sent them 10, and they still thought that was too many. So what I ended up coming with were these 5 teams. And I just want to pull up the honorable mentions that I put together because they were Memphis and Milwaukee. I thought Memphis and Milwaukee, for what they had available, they did the best work that they could around the margins. And to me, I thought that was snaps worthy if we're going to go Legally Blonde style. It was worthy of snaps. Miles Turner, hate it or love it, the waving of Damian Lillard, all that, they were able to finagle moves that I personally was not thinking or did not think was going to be possible. The same could be said with the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, you don't turn down 4 picks for Desmond Bane. You were able to build back up some depth, and I personally like the idea of committee approach, replacing those Desmond Bane minutes with Contavious Caldwell-Pope, Cam Spencer, Jalen Wells, and Cedric Howard being, and I know people are a bit frightened with Cedric Howard's injury, as it is a torn labrum and partially torn rotator cuff, and he's yet to be cleared from my understanding. That's why he wasn't playing in Summer League. But I thought those were the 2 teams that were worthy of being honorable mentions. Those would have been my 6 or 7. I think I was trying to argue that they should be tied for 5th, but people were like, that's still too many. And I think that's the one that, hey, they do deserve snaps. So before we go, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you guys think of my 5 teams? In this specific order, these are the 5 best off seasons. And if you've been watching the channel for a while now, I have said repeatedly that I believe that Cam Johnson was the perfect Michael Porter Jr. replacement. Like, when they won the title, I said this repeatedly. I was like, it really just feels like you could have just traded Michael Porter Jr. for Cam Johnson and gotten a similar production. I've said this for years. And the fact that that happened is, honestly, I love. I love the Jonas Valanciunas edition. I was at this point saying, like, they should just bring in Vasilija Micic. I would have loved that. And I think they've set themselves, Ben Tenzer, the new, I guess, president, you would say, or general manager of the Denver Nuggets, has done a really good job there. I think they put together a really good squad. Jamal Murray, Christian Brown. They have themselves now a legit backup in Jonas Valanciunas, Cam Johnson, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic, as well as it seems like a Monte Morris or maybe a Corey Joseph ends up coming back. I think is going to be very, very interesting to see that all come together. So I'm impressed with what the Nuggets have been able to do. The Atlanta Hawks, they are able to put together Kristaps Porzingis. They have Onyeka Okongwu. They have themselves now just a very solid team, top to bottom. We're going to go through the whole thing, but I like how they kind of push the chips to the table without mortgaging the future, while seeing if they can really go to the next level with Trae Young. Ansi Saul has done a really good job there. The Clippers are the 3rd team. Yeah, it might be a retirement home, but basically replace Norman Powell with Bradley Beal for a fraction of the cost, and you're expecting similar production, if not maybe a little bit, like not as high scoring because he is a little bit older. But this might be one of the best Clipper squads they've had in years. Houston, I think they took a valid swing with Kevin Durant, and they're such a deep team, especially now that they have Josh Okogie. And then Orlando, they're trying to see if they're good, if they have the ability to go to that next step. So let's go through it and let's talk about the Denver Nuggets. Going to be the first team. As we mentioned earlier, Jamal Murray. I love them bringing back Bruce Brown. They also have Curtis Jones, who I think is going to be one of those two-way guys who's ended up going to be a lot better than people were expected. You have yourself Christian Brown, Julian Strawther, who I think is going to take a step forward. Spencer Jones is on a two-way. I do like Jalen Pickett. He's a great third-string guard right there, and especially I know he's at shooting guard, but you probably flip Bruce Brown and Jalen Pickett. I don't know why I had it like that. Either way, what I do believe is bringing in a Monte Morris to be the third-string, or even a Corey Joseph, that be chef's kiss on top, perfect veteran to have right there. And as we look for the rest of the roster, as I mentioned earlier, Tim Hardaway Jr. was someone that I didn't mention, but him being behind Cam Johnson, playing this kind of six-man role, green light, come in, and if they actually let Hunter Tyson shoot the ball, he's another great shooter who can help out, Julian Strawther. One of the biggest things for me right now is Payne Watson is obviously the guy. We don't know if they're going to extend. Will they use him as a trade chip? That could potentially be the case if October passes and he's not extended. Do expect Christian Brown to be extended. He is a huge part of this team. Aaron Gordon still there, rocking it out. Yes, the future of the power forward position could be questionable, but that's why you might keep Payne Watson and believe that he could be the guy who replaces Aaron Gordon eventually. Zeke Nnaji's still a bad contract, but hey, maybe Mr. David Aldman is... Did I say David Aldman? Coach Adelman. But it's Adelman, right? Adelman. And also David Adelman is his father. So right now, why am I blanking on Adelman's? Either way, Coach Adelman. We're just going to go with Coach Adelman. Has Nikola Jokic, De'Ron Holmes, who I absolutely love. And he moved well for being a guy coming off of a torn Achilles. Like, pretty solid. And then you have Jonas Valanciunas, who would be a starting center on a lot of other teams. And yeah, it's David Adelman. It's David Adelman, right? Yeah, it's David Adelman. His father was Rick Adelman. Yes. God. Just very basic white people name. That's the problem right there. Now, moving forward, what do I think about this team? I think they've put themselves in a good financial situation. They're not like handcuffed to any of the aprons. They have a little bit of a cushion, and they know that they're going to have to be giving Nikola Jokic an extension. So I think they have the flexibility to make some trades still this season while being able to take on the deal in the future. Now, they do have the non-taxpayer mid-level exception from my understanding and the biannual exception. In the way that now they have, my apology, I did not mean to make that go back, but the way that it looks like is that they are ready to make another move. Maybe they don't have the assets to convince, and that's why I think Payne Watson is somebody, but they are able to sign another decent player. Who may that be? I don't know. I think we're all waiting for a lot of dominoes still to fall in terms of the restricted free agents, Cam Thomas, Josh Giddey, and Quentin Grimes. But just from a trade exception standpoint, that $7 million, you throw in Zeke Nnaji, that's like potentially $15 million you could be trading for of an expiring salary that might be useful. And I think the biggest thing is that they address the shooting. I think my biggest question is the forward position. I think that if they can get a combo, a Dean Wade would be perfect. If they can get Dean Wade, I think that would really round out the bench, in my opinion. My dog is also like so asleep that she's doing like the leg jitter. So we're going to go forward to the Atlanta Hawks. I absolutely love this. Trae Young, Vit Krejci, who is a great Swiss Army. Kobe Buffkin, if he can stay healthy, he's only played 27 games in 2 seasons. They brought back Keaton Wallace. Dyson Daniels, defensive guy. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 2 guys that I bumped into, like maybe blacked out drunk in Vegas a week or so ago that I'm so embarrassed about. But Nikola Drusic, and of course, Zachary Richardson, Luke Kennard, Jacob Toppin, Caleb Houston. Caleb Houston is a bomber. If you look at his stats, dude, this guy like takes 3 shots a game. 2.8 of them are like threes. And he's a really 6'8". This is a low risk, like potential, not like breakout, but a guy could be a bigger contributor than Luke Kennard, 40% shooter who can also be a secondary facilitator at times. Richardson is a combo forward that I love. Jalen Johnson looks fantastic. By the way, 43% Asa Newell shot from 3 this summer league, and he also did it on almost 3 attempts a night. Then they have Kristaps Porzingis and Onyeka Okongwu. Also, Eli Nadi, who looks like they're going to have on a 2-way. Not that bad, baby. And then Mo Gay, baby. Give me some Mo of that any day. That was cheesy. So with that being said, I just think this team has a lot of length. The shortest dude in any lineup with Trae Young is going to be potentially 6'4", 6'5". Like, it's going to be Trae Young or Kobe Buffkin being the shortest guy on the floor. If that's the backup point guard, it'd be Krejci, who's like 6'8" almost. They are basically 6'5" and above team at all times. This is a long team that can play both ends of the floor, and that's got me excited. Now, they got room, baby, and that's because Tony Ressler ain't going to spend a penny on the luxury. Don't expect that. I think they've spent 1 year the luxury tax. So, and they do have like the largest gap. If they wanted to do anything, they still have room to go out and make a bigger move. Also, don't expect a Porzingis extension, and maybe even not a Mr. Trae Young extension till next offseason, because I think they want to see what this team can do. And if it can do something, then they know it's worth keeping together. And basically the reason why Ansi Sala became the general manager and all this is, he gained the trust of the team over the last year since Landry Fields. I don't know if Landry Fields specifically brought him on, but had brought him on to be under him as the assistant general manager. And it's not, Landry is a bright guy and a nice guy, and I think he'll have a job in another office and maybe get a chance at it again, but he was still green behind the ears, and I think we all can agree that they were at a point with Mr. Trae Young being extension eligible and being the best passing point guard in the league and the best passer since Steve Nash, and arguably him and Jokic are the two best passers in the NBA, as well as Jalen Johnson looking like an all-star, potential all-NBA player, and a lot of like pieces, Dyson Daniels. This team could like actually take the next step, and from what I've spoken with people, is that they just needed somebody who had done that before, and Landry Fields had not done that before. And even though Ansi Sala had not done that himself, he had been with organizations that had done that before, specifically the Warriors most recently. And that's kind of the reason why they moved into a situation where they could do. So what I think the biggest thing is that they have themselves the ability also to still make moves if necessary, with Bogdanovic's trade exception being there that they could use. They can also use the Clint Capella. The whole Cody Zeller situation last year was wild. I completely forgot like that he just was there and then they had to like dump him. But that's like actually a really good situation that I like. The Atlanta Hawks being one of those teams that could surprise and be actually a contender this year and one of the better teams in the league. Now, the retirement home in the Los Angeles Clippers, I need to do the research, but they might arguably be one of the oldest teams in the NBA. But John Collins next to Zubac, I love that. And the fact that Zubac can sit and they can have a John Collins, Kawhi Leonard, Nick Batum, Bradley Beal, James Harden lineup, or Chris Paul, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Bradley Beal, John Collins, whatever iteration you want. The fact that they just have Brook Lopez, Yannick Niederhauser, Zubac, as well as Derek Jones, John Collins. By the way, Patrick Baldwin might become the light-skinned Steve Novak, and I want to stand by that. I want everybody to know that like is potentially going to happen, and if that does happen, I am so stoked for it, and I'm here for it. He just can't play defense, and just don't expect him to. But the fact that this guy can shoot the three-point ball the way that he can and shoot it over anybody might keep him in the NBA. Now, John Collins, switch big, has every tools to be a great power forward and has shown it could be a 20-10 guy. If he can just average like 15 and 10 for this team, shoot like 37% from three and be able to guard inside, outside, be a weak side rim protector and a small ball five, it's perfect. Tyronn Lue will actually maybe like prematurely ejaculate in his pants, but we don't know. Now, Nick Batum, Kawhi Leonard, Chris Dunn, and Bradley Beal being kind of like the wing rotation. They're running Batum and Kawhi more as like combo forwards, and then Bradley Beal and Chris Dunn will purely be twos, maybe in the small ball wings. Chris Dunn, I love that he's just going to be a Swiss Army knife. And Bradley Beal, people forget he's a great shooter still, and they don't need him to be the guy or to do what Norman Powell did last year. They just need him to score, play with, Chris Paul, James Harden, Bradley Beal, Kawhi, and John Collins. And all of those guys together can replace the scoring and the production that they had in Norman Powell, and then just the Swiss Army knife. And I think Grant just said it best here. The Clippers can literally use so many different combinations: small ball, double big, standard positional five, or they could literally go even super crazy small, where maybe a Derek Jones or a Nick Batum or even a Kawhi, if they don't want Collins or Zubac to play the center, and then run legit a guy like Derek Jones or Nick Batum at the five. Then you have Kawhi. Then you have yourself and I'm assuming Bogdanovic is the trade chip eventually. Like if they're going to trade anybody, it's going to be Bogdanovic, and still have Chris Paul. And the fact that, by the way, that Yannick Niederhauser and Brook Lopez are here is huge, because I love me some Zubac. Zubac was probably the third best center, if not the fifth best center in the NBA, and last year, and he was completely beat up by the time the playoffs came off. No offense to Drew Eubanks, they didn't really have a backup last year. So to me, getting a guy like Brook Lopez, say what you want, just having someone who can come in and just alleviate minutes and spread the floor and give you a different look, and then also having Niederhauser and John Collins, great way to do it. And to do it all with like contracts that you can get out of, that's snaps worthy in my opinion, because it just makes it a lot. And yeah, Grant just said Bogdan will probably be flipped for size at the deadline, tradable contract, and they have a lot of guards. I hope Jordan Miller comes back. Yeah, I think the biggest thing right here is Bogdan maybe just flip for a contract that they can waive, and then that they can convert some of their young guys that they really like, or they go after, as you said, somebody that's, expiring. And I really think if they went for size, it would be for another combo forward or like a wing. Dean Wade was a guy that I said earlier, and I think a lot of teams, like a team like right here in the Clippers, would really like Dean Wade. So to me, that's one that I think people would be interested in seeing. Now, we move on to what they have. They are at the luxury. I think they're basically $1 million under the first. I think they might be pushing it, and they are a repeater in the tax. The whole thing is moving off of that Bogdan contract will make everything better, and that's why Bogdan will do. And also, what role will CP3 play? CP3, it was already said from Lawrence Frank yesterday that he will be playing a reserve role, and I don't think trading Powell is a mistake. Like, personally, I think it's more so they weren't going to pay him what he wanted. They turned Powell into Bradley Beal and John Collins, arguably, and Chris Paul. And Chris Paul is a backup point guard who he could start on other teams, but the way it's going to work is James is the point guard, but then Chris Paul's going to be the sixth man, I think in ways. They're going to have multiple six mans, but Tyronn Lue's probably going to play a smaller lineup. It's just, yes, this is an older team, but the fact that they have so many options allows them to be, I think, even deadlier than that you wouldn't normally think. So let's go ahead and move to the rest of this. Okay, so I went over they still have PJ Tucker and Bones Highland. They're probably going to have to want to use one of those quickly. And that's where you think, do you go after an Anthony Simons or something like that if you still need some scoring? Because you could theoretically package maybe a Bogdan. And I think it's still too much money, but there's options out there that maybe you do find an expiring contract that you try to put together. So let's go over the Houston Rockets. I feel like this one's talked a lot about, but the Kevin Durant swing, I think, was a good one. The fact that you have Fred VanVleet, Aaron Holiday, and Reed Shepherd as your guard rotation, then now you have Josh Okogie and Dorian Finney-Smith as your two pit bulls. You have also Tari Eason and Amen Thompson as the two main pit bulls. So you have four guys who can be lockdown defenders with Kevin Durant and Jabari Smith and Alperen Sengun, Clint Capella and Steven Adams as your center depth, Jeff Green, Tari Eason, and Jabari Smith power forward. You have Jayshawn Tate and Dorian Finney-Smith, Josh Okogie behind Kevin Durant. Amen Thompson, if he takes the jump that we're all expecting, is going to be phenomenal. Probably an all-star, maybe a defensive player of the year candidate. The Fred VanVleet brings the grit that they need. This is just a complete team that you have your primary scorer in Kevin Durant. You have Alperen Sengun and Fred VanVleet and hopefully Amen Thompson as your secondary creators, all just splitting that there. Shagun's baby Jokic, okay? Shagun's baby Jokic and a better defender that you think. And the other thing is that there's just so many guys that if someone gets hurt, they have the same guy replacing him. They have multiple options. And basically everything we talked about with the Clippers just now, the Rockets have that, but probably younger guys. The only difference is maybe some of them are a little bit not tested, but like this is the best team that Kevin Durant's been on since the Golden State Warriors. That's straight up. And I think they're a legit top 2 seed. Now, and they still have money and they still have room. That's the crazy thing. Yeah, they're like a little bit over the apron, but they're probably going to move somebody and do something about that. And they still have room for the extensions that are going to have to come up and ways to pivot. and be able to do salary cap gymnastics. And to them, I think the biggest thing now is probably moving whatever contract they move next is arguably going to be somebody that they don't expect to pay or don't expect to play. So that could be anybody. Some people might think that's Tari Eason. I think they would want to keep Tari. I think they're going to figure out a way to keep the players that they want and keep money open because they're building something that seems sustainable. Orlando, they wanted to take the swing and they took the swing. Those picks, if the swing goes right, and regardless if they don't win a championship, they're expecting to have those picks to be 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, So having now Jalen Suggs, Tyus Jones, and Anthony Black, you have three guys that have all proven they can play. You have who can all do different things. Anthony Black being the best passer, arguably, and maybe could be a breakout star. Jalen Suggs being the modern day prime Drew Holiday potentially. And then Tyus Jones, a turnover, efficient sharpshooter who is a spot starter or elite backup point guard. Desmond Bane, one of the best shooters on the planet. Jace Richardson, who could be a steal. Jet Howard, who's, could be something. Maybe. Still haven't seen it, but he's a shooter. Franz Wagner, we saw him play really well before the injury, and then it all cratered in terms of shooting. But he could be one of the top players at his position. Noah Penda had flashes. Jonathan Isaac, still one of the best defenders. Wendell Carter, when healthy, very efficient double-double guy. Mo Wagner, great six-man. Gogo Batazde. And, of course, Paulo Banchero, who has MVP potential. They really put together a complete squad that has different looks, can play big, can play, you just against any lineup. The whole thing is, can they shoot the ball? They haven't been able to lately. And they still have room in terms of their money. They can still make moves to get somebody better or, save cap to go re-sign their guys. And they can go out and use their exceptions still. And I think the ability that they can go and splurge on somebody or wait to use it in the season is huge. And that's something that people need to keep an eye out for. So those were my 5 teams. We had Denver, Atlanta, the Clippers. We also had ourselves the last 2 teams, the Houston Rockets, the Orlando Magic, with 2 honorable mentions being the Memphis Grizzlies and the Milwaukee Bucks, who I thought did a really good job of working around the margins. So if you guys made it to this part, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts.